The calm before the storm. The Meridian Research Facility hung in space like a silver jewel against the backdrop of Valthera's crystal moon. The station's sleek curves and glowing energy conduits gave it an appearance of advanced elegance, though anyone familiar with galactic research protocols might have questioned the wisdom of housing the galaxy's most dangerous predators so far from any rescue fleet. Commander Thys of the Alarian Republic prided himself on running one of the most advanced xenobiological research stations in known space. His species had evolved on peaceful garden worlds where conflict was resolved through meditation, and the most dangerous creature was a flower that occasionally sneezed pollen. This background perhaps explained why Thys viewed the containment of nightmarish Deathworld predators with the same casual confidence one might reserve for housing particularly aggressive houseplants. The commander's office overlooked the station's central hub, where researchers from dozens of species went about their daily routines. Alarians with their graceful movements and luminescent skin patterns worked alongside the insectoid Valorians, while the towering Krillian security personnel maintained their vigilant patrols. At the center of it all, the station's most prized specimen was held in a containment chamber that represented the cutting edge of galactic science. Dr. Kent, the station's chief xenobiologist and a member of the highly analytical Valorian species, had been expressing concerns about their prized specimen for weeks. The Valorians had survived their home world's frequent ecological collapses by developing an almost supernatural ability to predict disaster through pattern recognition. Dr. Kent could sense catastrophe approaching like others might sense weather changes, which made his current assignment something of a professional nightmare. The specimen they housed was a shadow maw from Grimbold, a world so hostile that the Galactic Survey had classified it as uninhabitable after losing 3 exploration teams. Shadow maws were apex predators that fed on terror itself, growing stronger as their prey became more frightened. They possessed the unsettling ability to phase partially through matter, making traditional containment methods largely ineffective. The creature stood nearly 4 meters tall when fully materialized, with a form that seemed to shift between solid matter and living shadow. The quantum field fluctuations are increasing daily, Dr. Kent informed Commander Thys during their morning briefing, his compound eyes reflecting patterns of deep concern. The creature is testing the boundaries of its containment. It's learning. Commander Thys waved away the concerns with characteristic optimism. His people had solved every problem in their history through patient discussion and innovative thinking. Surely a single predator, no matter how dangerous, couldn't present an insurmountable challenge to galactic science. The containment fields are rated for creatures twice as dangerous, Thys replied smoothly. Our quantum matrices are state-of-the-art, backed up by 17 redundant systems. There's absolutely no possibility of containment failure. Security Chief Raxon, a Krillian whose species had evolved from pack hunters on a world of endless winter, was less convinced. His people understood predators in ways that garden world species simply couldn't comprehend. They recognized the signs of a hunter planning its escape, the subtle behavioral changes that indicated an intelligent predator studying its captors for weaknesses. Permission to implement additional security protocols, Raxon requested, his voice carrying the growling undertones common to his species. The creature's behavior patterns suggest it's preparing for something. Unnecessary, Commander Thys declared. We're scientists, not prison wardens. The creature is contained, studied, and perfectly safe. What none of them had anticipated was the human element that had joined their crew 6 months earlier. Maya Chen had arrived as part of the Terran Colonial Defense Academy's Cultural Exchange Program, officially there to study interspecies cooperation and xenobiology. The reality was somewhat different. Maya represented humanity's latest attempt to understand how other species perceived Earth's inhabitants. Humans had been members of galactic civilization for less than a century, and their reputation preceded them in ways that weren't always helpful. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that most species considered it uninhabitable. The fact that intelligent life had not only evolved there, but had gone on to develop space travel, was viewed with a mixture of awe and terror by the galactic community. The problem was that Maya didn't behave like the hypervigilant warrior the crew expected from a Deathworld native. Instead, she spent most of her time in various states of rest that ranged from light dozing to deep sleep. She napped in the research labs, dozed during emergency drills, and once fell asleep while standing upright during a tour of the weapons locker. Her favorite spot was the observation lounge, a comfortable area with large viewports overlooking Valthera's crystal formations. Maya had claimed a particular corner where she'd arranged several chairs into what she called her nap configuration. The setup looked haphazard to alien eyes, but it allowed her to rest while maintaining what human military doctrine called situational awareness. The other crew members gave Maya a wide berth, partly out of respect for her Deathworld origins, and partly because they found her behavior deeply unsettling. Dr. Kent had run extensive scans to ensure she wasn't suffering from some sort of metabolic disorder, while Security Chief Raxon couldn't shake the feeling that her constant state of relaxation was somehow tactical. "It's not natural behavior for an apex predator," Raxon confided to his security team during their shift briefing. "She acts like she has no natural enemies. Either she's supremely confident in her abilities, or she's hiding something we don't understand." What Raxon failed to grasp was that humans had indeed evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, but they'd survived by becoming the thing that other predators learned to avoid. Maya's casual attitude wasn't ignorance. It was the supreme confidence of a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain through superior intelligence, adaptability, and a willingness to use any available resource as a weapon. The day everything changed started with routine morning diagnostics. Dr. Kent discovered what he politely termed significant anomalies in the Shadow Moss containment readings. The quantum fields were fluctuating in patterns that suggested the creature was somehow learning to manipulate them. Energy readings showed spikes that corresponded to the creature's feeding cycles, indicating it was drawing strength from sources the researchers hadn't identified. "Commander, we need to discuss immediate containment upgrades," Dr. Kent insisted, his voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic. "The creature is adapting to our systems faster than we anticipated." Commander Thiss reviewed the reports with the kind of selective attention that had made his career possible. He saw numbers within acceptable parameters, energy readings that were elevated but not critically so, and what appeared to be normal behavior for a creature adjusting to captivity. "Dr. Kent, your species is naturally prone to catastrophic thinking," Thiss replied diplomatically. "These readings are well within normal ranges for a creature of this type. Perhaps you should consider that your concerns are influenced by evolutionary bias rather than scientific observation." Meanwhile, Maya had settled into her afternoon nap routine in the observation lounge. She'd arranged her chairs with the precision of someone who understood that comfort was a tactical advantage. Her position gave her clear sightlines to all entrances, while keeping her back to the reinforced viewport. One chair served as her primary seat, while another was positioned within easy reach, close enough to grab without fully opening her eyes. To alien observers, Maya's setup looked like the random arrangement of someone seeking comfort. In reality, it was the careful positioning of someone whose ancestors had survived by never being completely defenseless, even in sleep. The nearby chair wasn't just furniture. It was a potential weapon, shield, or tool, depending on circumstances. Dr. Kent made one final attempt to convince the command staff of the growing danger. His analysis showed that the Shadow Maw's behavior patterns had changed significantly over the past week. The creature was spending less time in its solid form and more time as shadow, suggesting it was preparing for something that required mobility. "The quantum signatures indicate the creature is testing phase boundaries," he explained to anyone who would listen. "It's not just adapting to containment, it's planning to overcome it." His warnings were dismissed as Valorian paranoia. The species was known for seeing disaster in every minor anomaly, a survival trait that had served them well on their unpredictable homeworld, but made them seem hysterical to species from more stable environments. Security Chief Raxon had spent the morning reviewing defensive protocols that hadn't been updated since the station's construction. The weapons systems were designed to handle standard containment breaches, not creatures that could phase through matter. His security teams were trained to fight solid opponents, not shadows that fed on fear itself. At precisely 1347 station time, 17 different systems failed in a cascade that would later be studied as a perfect example of Murphy's Law in action. The quantum containment fields flickered. The backup generators experienced what the technical manual euphemistically called temporary power fluctuation, and the Shadow Maw discovered that its prison had become more of a suggestion than a requirement. The creature's escape began with a sound like reality tearing at the seams. The quantum fields collapsed with a harmonic resonance that sent shivers through the station's superstructure. Emergency alarms began wailing, their piercing tones designed to alert every sentient being aboard that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Commander Thys felt his confidence evaporate as security feeds showed the Shadow Maw flowing through corridors like liquid nightmare. The creature had grown during its captivity, fed by the background fear and stress of the crew who lived in proximity to something they instinctively recognized as predatory perfection. All hands to emergency stations, Thys announced over the station's communication system, his voice cracking with the sort of terror that accompanied the realization that one's optimism had been tragically misplaced. Code Black, repeat Code Black. We have a catastrophic containment breach. Throughout the station, crew members scrambled for emergency protocols that no one had seriously expected to use. The Illyrians activated their meditation chambers, hoping to achieve the mental clarity needed for crisis management. The Valorians began calculating escape probabilities with the sort of mathematical precision that their species applied to all disasters. The Krillians grabbed every weapon they could find and began hunting in packs, because that's what Krillians did when confronted with an apex predator. Security Chief Raxon marshaled his teams with military efficiency, deploying plasma weapons and energy barriers in patterns designed to contain and eliminate the threat. The problem was that their entire tactical doctrine was based on fighting solid opponents that followed predictable physics. The Shadow Maw operated by rules that made conventional warfare seem quaint. Dr. Kent, who had been expecting this exact scenario for months, calmly sealed himself in his emergency laboratory and began documenting the disaster for posterity. His observations would later become required reading at the Galactic Safety Commission, though few beings would believe his conclusions about human nature. The Shadow Maw began its hunt with the methodical patience of a creature that had never encountered anything capable of threatening it. The beast flowed through the station's corridors like living darkness, its form shifting between solid matter and shadow as it searched for prey. Its feeding process was as much psychological as physical. The creature grew stronger as its victims became more terrified, creating a feedback loop that made it increasingly dangerous. The first victims were a team of Illyrian researchers who encountered the creature in a service corridor. Their natural pacifist philosophy provided no framework for dealing with something that viewed them as food. Their terror fed the Shadow Maw, making it larger and more solid as it prepared to consume them. Security teams converged on the creature's position, their energy weapons whining as they charged. The first volley of plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the Shadow Maw's shadow form, striking the bulkheads behind it with brilliant flashes of superheated energy. The creature solidified just long enough to slash at the nearest security officer with claws that could cut through battle armor like paper, then phased back to shadow form before return fire could find their mark. Chief Raxon watched his carefully planned defensive positions crumble as the Shadow Maw demonstrated why it was considered the apex predator of one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. The creature wasn't just hunting, it was playing with them, demonstrating the same casual cruelty that cats showed to mice, if cats were 4 meters tall and capable of existing in multiple states of matter simultaneously. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the station as automated systems tried to contain the threat through compartmentalization. The strategy might have worked against a conventional predator, but the Shadow Maw simply phased through the barriers as if they were suggestions rather than solid matter. Meanwhile, in the observation lounge, Maya continued her afternoon nap, apparently oblivious to the chaos erupting throughout the station. The emergency alarms were certainly loud enough to wake the dead, but Maya had grown up in New Detroit, where sirens were as common as rainfall. Her subconscious mind had learned to filter out warning sounds unless they represented immediate personal threats. The Shadow Maw worked its way through the station with predatory intelligence, systematically eliminating defensive positions while herding potential prey into increasingly confined spaces. This wasn't random violence. It was strategic thinking applied with the efficiency of a creature that had never encountered anything capable of matching its abilities. Commander Thys, barricaded in his command center, watched security feeds with the growing realization that every assumption he'd made about containment and safety had been tragically optimistic. The creature was dismantling their defenses with contemptuous ease, growing stronger with each terrified scream. "How long until the distress signal reaches the nearest patrol?" he asked his communications officer, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 18 hours for signal propagation, minimum 12 hours for response, came the reply. Assuming they don't classify this as a loss scenario requiring orbital sterilization. The commander's face turned an unhealthy shade of green. Orbital sterilization was the Galactic Safety Commission's preferred solution for escaped Deathworld predators. It was efficient, thorough, and ensured that embarrassing incidents didn't get reported to the media. As the Shadow Maw continued its systematic hunt, it detected something unusual in the electromagnetic spectrum. Most prey exhibited predictable patterns when confronted with imminent death, rapid heartbeats, stress hormones, and the distinctive energy signatures of mortal terror. But there was something different emanating from the observation lounge, a steady rhythmic pattern that suggested deep, peaceful sleep. The creature paused in its hunt, its alien intelligence puzzling over this anomaly. In its extensive experience across multiple worlds, only apex predators could sleep so soundly in the presence of danger. The electromagnetic signature was that of a being so secure in its environment that it felt no need for vigilance. Curious now, the Shadow Maw began moving toward the observation lounge, drawn by the mystery of prey that didn't recognize its own mortality. The creature flowed through corridors with increasing anticipation, eager to discover what manner of being could remain so calm while death stalked the corridors around it. The unlikely hero. The observation lounge had become an island of calm in the storm of chaos that had engulfed the Meridian Research Facility. While emergency alarms wailed throughout the station and security teams fought a losing battle against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare, Maya Chen continued her afternoon nap with the sort of profound peace that only comes from complete confidence in one's ability to handle whatever life might throw at you. Her breathing was slow and steady, her body arranged in the chair with casual comfort that spoke of someone who had never encountered a situation she couldn't handle. To alien observers, this might have seemed like dangerous complacency. In reality, it was the supreme confidence of an apex predator taking a nap between meals. The Shadow Maw approached the observation lounge with growing fascination. The creature's sensory organs, evolved to detect the electromagnetic signatures of fear and terror, were picking up something unprecedented. The sleeping figure radiated an aura of calm that was almost insulting in its completeness. Here was a being so unconcerned with danger that it had apparently decided to take a nap while death itself stalked the corridors. The creature paused at the entrance to the lounge, its form shifting between solid matter and shadow as it studied this anomaly. The sleeping figure was small by galactic standards, bipedal, with the pale skin and dark hair that the station's records identified as human. According to the data files, humans were Deathworld natives, which should have made them hyper-vigilant survivors constantly alert for threats. Yet here was a human who had somehow achieved such complete security in her environment that she felt comfortable enough to sleep deeply while the Shadow Maw hunted through the station. The creature's predatory instincts were sending conflicting signals. Everything about the situation suggested easy prey. The human was small, apparently defenseless, and completely unaware of approaching danger. But the electromagnetic signature told a different story, one that spoke of a predator so confident in its abilities that it saw no need for caution. Maya's subconscious mind had been tracking the approaching threat for several minutes. Her auditory cortex processed the distinctive sound of something large moving through the station's corridors, the subtle vibrations through the deck plating, the slight changes in air pressure, the electromagnetic disturbances that accompanied the creature's phase shifts. Her brain cataloged these sensory inputs and filed them under potential threat approaching, while maintaining the sleep state that allowed her conscious mind to rest. This was a survival mechanism refined over millions of years of human evolution. Early humans had learned to sleep lightly, with part of their awareness always monitoring their environment for signs of danger. Those who couldn't master this skill became evolutionary dead ends, consumed by the various predators that shared prehistoric Earth. The shadow maw entered the observation lounge with predatory grace, its form solidifying as it prepared to claim what appeared to be the easiest prey it had encountered since its escape. The creature stood nearly 4 meters tall in its solid form, a nightmare of living shadow, and razor-sharp claws designed by evolution to harvest terror and convert it into sustenance. As the creature approached her position, Maya's eyes opened slowly, not the startled awakening of prey suddenly aware of danger, but the measured response of someone assessing a situation before deciding how to handle it. Her gaze tracked over the shadow maw with the sort of clinical evaluation that a professional might give to equipment in need of maintenance. "Well," Maya said softly, her voice carrying none of the terror that the creature had come to expect from its prey. "That's inconvenient." The shadow maw paused, its alien intelligence struggling to process this response. In its experience, prey reacted to its presence with immediate, overwhelming terror. The fear was what made them delicious, the terror that fed the creature and made it stronger. But this small human seemed more annoyed than afraid, as if the presence of a 4-meter-tall shadow monster was nothing more than a minor interruption to her afternoon nap. Maya shifted in her chair, not standing but simply adjusting her position to get a better look at her uninvited visitor. Her movement was economical, precise, like someone who understood that energy conservation was a survival skill. She reached out casually and grasped the nearby chair that she positioned earlier, lifting it with the sort of practiced ease that spoke of someone who viewed everything in her environment as a potential tool. "You know," Maya continued conversationally, "I was having the most wonderful dream about my grandmother's apple orchard. She used to tell me stories about the old country while I helped her pick apples. There was this one tree that grew the sweetest fruit, but it was always just out of reach." The shadow maw found itself in the unprecedented situation of being confused by its prey. The human's electromagnetic signature remained calm, almost meditative. There was no trace of the fear that the creature needed to feed, no delicious terror to strengthen its abilities. Instead, there was something else, a predatory awareness that the shadow maw was beginning to recognize as dangerous. Maya stood up slowly, still holding the chair with casual confidence. Her movement was fluid, economical, like someone who had trained extensively in the efficient use of her body. She wasn't large by galactic standards, barely reaching 1.7 meters in height, but there was something in her posture that suggested she was far more dangerous than her size indicated. "The thing about apple orchards," Maya continued, her tone remaining conversational, as she faced down a creature that had terrorized 3 exploration teams, "is that you learn to work with what you have. Sometimes the ladder isn't tall enough, so you use a stick. Sometimes the stick isn't long enough, so you throw something at the branch to shake the apples loose." The shadow maw shifted to its shadow form, attempting to use its primary advantage, the ability to phase through matter at will. The creature flowed around Maya like living darkness, seeking to engulf her in the sort of terror that would feed its hunger and strengthen its corporeal form. Maya watched the creature's movement with professional interest, tracking its patterns with the sort of analytical attention that suggested she understood exactly what she was dealing with. As the shadow maw began to solidify behind her, preparing to strike with claws that could slice through battle armor. Maya made her move. She swung the chair in a precise arc, timing her movement to coincide with the creature's transition from shadow to solid form. The metal chair struck the shadow maw at the exact moment when it was most vulnerable, partially materialized but not yet fully solid. The impact caught the creature in a state where it couldn't phase through the attack but wasn't stable enough to absorb the blow effectively. The shadow maw staggered, its form flickering between states as it struggled to maintain coherence. For the first time in its existence, the creature had encountered something that seemed to understand its nature better than it understood itself. The trick with predators, Maya explained, adjusting her grip on the chair as the creature attempted to circle her, is understanding their hunting patterns. You guys phase between solid and shadow states, but there's always a moment of vulnerability during the transition. You feed on fear, which makes you stronger, but you also need to solidify to actually attack. That creates a window of opportunity for anyone smart enough to recognize it. The shadow maw attempted another attack, this time trying to overwhelm Maya with pure speed and aggression. The creature solidified and lunged forward with claws extended, seeking to end this unprecedented encounter through overwhelming force. Maya stepped aside with minimal effort, using the chair to deflect the creature's claws while simultaneously striking at its center of mass. Her movements were economical, precise, like someone who had trained extensively in the efficient use of violence. She wasn't trying to overpower the creature. She was using its own momentum against it, redirecting its attacks while delivering precise strikes to vulnerable points. The shadow maw found itself in the unfamiliar position of being outmatched by something a fraction of its size. Every attack was countered. Every attempt to use its phase abilities was anticipated and exploited. The human seemed to understand its nature in ways that the creature didn't understand itself. Earth has some interesting predators, Maya continued, her breathing steady despite the physical exertion of fighting a 4-meter-tall shadow monster. We've got big cats that hunt by stealth, pack hunters that coordinate their attacks, and ambush predators that strike from hiding. But you know what they all have in common? They're all afraid of humans. The shadow maw made one final desperate attempt, gathering all its remaining strength for a concentrated attack. The creature phased to shadow form and attempted to engulf Maya completely, seeking to drain her life force through direct contact. Maya had been waiting for exactly this move. As the shadow maw enveloped her in living darkness, she jammed the chair directly into the creature's core, the metal frame acting as a conductor for the electromagnetic fields that kept the creature coherent. The chair's metal structure disrupted the delicate balance that allowed the shadow maw to maintain its phase abilities, causing catastrophic system failure in the creature's alien physiology. The shadow maw collapsed, its form flickering rapidly between solid and shadow states before finally stabilizing as ordinary organic matter. The creature that had terrorized 3 exploration teams and nearly destroyed the Meridian Research Facility was defeated by a sleepy human with a metal chair and an understanding of applied physics. Maya looked down at the motionless form of the shadow maw, then shrugged and returned to her chair arrangement. She had to adjust the positioning slightly since one of her chairs was now occupied by the corpse of a galactic apex predator, but she managed to recreate her comfortable napping configuration. As emergency teams finally gained access to the observation lounge, they found Maya settling back into her afternoon nap as if nothing unusual had happened. The fact that she was surrounded by the remains of the station's most dangerous specimen seemed to be of less concern to her than the disruption to her sleep schedule. Commander Thys arrived with the first response team, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, relief, and dawning comprehension. The human had accomplished what their most advanced weapons and defensive systems had failed to achieve, and she'd done it while barely working up a sweat. "How?" was all the commander managed to say. Maya opened one eye and regarded him with the sort of patient attention one might give to a child asking obvious questions. "Physics," she said simply, "and a decent understanding of predator behavior. Also, this is a really good chair for hitting things with." Security Chief Raxon examined the scene with the professional appreciation of someone who understood violence as a practical skill. The human had defeated a creature that had overwhelmed his entire security force, and she'd done it with improvised weapons and tactics that were simultaneously elegant and brutal. "Your species," Raxon said slowly, "you're not just Deathworld survivors. You're the reason your world is classified as uninhabitable by most galactic standards." Maya smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly terrifying. "We'd prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable," she said. "Earth is a challenging place to live, so we learn to be challenging back. It's worked out pretty well for us so far." Dr. Kent arrived with the second wave of responders, his compound eyes taking in every detail of the scene with scientific precision. His observations would later form the basis for a complete revision of human threat assessments throughout galactic civilization. "The creature fed on fear," Dr. Kent observed, "but you weren't afraid of it." "Should I have been?" Maya asked, settling more comfortably into her chair. "It was just another predator doing what predators do. Earth has plenty of those. The trick is understanding that being a predator doesn't make you invincible. It just means you've specialized in hunting things that can't fight back effectively." As the station's crew worked to clean up the aftermath of the Shadow Maw's brief reign of terror, Maya closed her eyes and prepared to resume her interrupted nap. The crisis was over, the threat was neutralized, and she had several hours of sleep to catch up on. The other crew members watched her with a mixture of awe and newfound respect. They had finally understood what Dr. Kent would later document in his official report. Humans weren't just survivors from a death world. They were apex predators who had evolved by becoming the thing that other predators learned to fear. And sometimes, the most dangerous predator was the one who looked like she was just taking a nap.